Good afternoon, this is Martin with Team Real Estate and
Justin Rabin with Fountain Mortgage.
Gotta tell you what, I love talking about money, Justin, do you?
Sure, who doesn't?
The only thing that's more fun than talking about money is printing it. It's printing. So usually we come to Kevin, who's our videographer. We come over to his office. We print the money here. Should we give the address? Let the Treasury Department know where to show up?
Yeah, let's just keep that between us.
Okay. All right. We'll keep printing on our own. So look, we're halfway through the year, and some folks have already built their dream, and they're in the process of living it because you and I and our teams help them get into a home. But there's a whole bunch of people that are in motion that are wondering what kind of things are in the mix that can make it easier or more difficult for them to buy their dream home. So why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely, love to. So, one of the biggest things is how we structure a down payment. So depends, there's different sources for a down payment, and sometimes there's sources for down payment that people don't really even think about. The down payment can come from 401k, and a lot of times you don't have to pay any type of penalty on that because it's a hardship withdrawal to buy a home with it. Another option would be a gift from a family member, so they can gift you funds towards a down payment for
Justin, are we family?
We are family.
Do you want to give me a gift?
Let's talk about that off here.
All right. So you've got 401k hardship withdrawal.
Yep.
You've got gift from family. What else?
Well, let's talk about the don'ts. So if for down payment purposes, cash is a bad word in the mortgage industry. So if you're planning on taking a bunch of cash, you have a bunch of cash saved up, and you're planning on using that towards buying a home, it's going to be tough. So what I recommend, if you're planning on doing that, if you have a lot of cash saved up, let's spend some time together to talk through that, because there are ways we can work around that.
So now back up for a second, because as kids we're always taught that the cash is king, right? What is it that has a mortgage company looking at available cash as maybe a red flag or a warning sign?
Right. So when it comes to funds put into a real estate transaction, so down payment, closing costs, anything that you put into it, we have to source, we have to see where those funds are coming from. So when you go to closing, you can't just show up with a bunch of cash. That's the first thing. The next thing is that we're going to document your down payment funds through bank statements. So what we do is, if we're looking through the transaction history of that bank statement and we see a big random cash deposit on there, it's going to draw questions. We have to see where that came from, and cash you cannot source.
So is it enough of an explanation to simply have you and the borrower sit down and draft a letter to, say, your underwriter that says, we set aside $1,000 a month towards this fund, and we keep it at home in a coffee can, and this has been $1,000 a month over 5 years, which equals $60,000. Is the letter of explanation enough?
No.
Okay.
No, cash is not sourceable. So we can't tell where it came from. It could have come from anywhere, regardless of how we explain it. The big thing is that we have to determine that funds being used towards the transaction, that they came from a reliable source, right? So employment, stimulus, that's something like that. So it can't just be something that we can't tell where it came from. Now, if it's seasoned funds, little tip here, if it's seasoned funds where we can't see it in the bank statement, transaction, then no questions asked.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So see, he's more than just a pretty face. He can help you make sure you get a mortgage loan. So it's June. We've talked a little bit about the do's and the don'ts of cash. Let's talk about market factors.
Yeah.
So recently I was asked by a fairly large group of people on an online webinar what my thoughts were with regards to the impact of the cost of raw materials. And obviously, if you're getting a home remodeled, the cost went up, but not just by the cost of raw materials, because the way most contractors work it is they take cost of raw materials and labor and they add profit on top of it. So if raw materials went up 20%, you add that back to your labor, which probably also went up just a little bit, and then you get profit on top of that. So your total remodel went up more than just 20%. Same thing, of course, happens when people are building a new home. So how do you see, what do you see as a major factor maybe in the month of June that people might not be considering that could impact their ability to borrow funds?
Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit about interest rates, and probably the biggest question that I get in my role is, what do I think the interest rates are going to do for the rest of the year? So maybe you're building a home and you're 9-10 months out. What are the rates going to do? Because generally we can't lock in an interest rate on a new construction home until we get a little bit closer to the projected closing date. So that's one of the biggest questions I get, is what do I think that they're going to do? And interest rates, they're very investor driven. So what I mean by that is that there's investors out there, they're investing in markets, and that has an impact on interest rates. Kind of a rule of thumb is that if a stock market's doing well one day, chances are home rates are suffering a little bit from that. Doesn't always go like that, but it's kind of a general rule of thumb. So great for your 401ks, but bad for home interest rates when it's lap.
So if the stock market is doing well, then an investor might choose to put their money in another type of investment rather than invest it in a home buyer.
Right.
So they could put it someplace else, make more money. So in order for a home buyer to borrow that money from an investor, they would have to pay a higher rate.
Right. So it's a different type of investment. So it's for home rates, they're revolved around government bonds. So they're buying government bonds, which is a safe haven. So if they feel like the economy's not going all that well, they'll reinvest into government bonds. Whereas the stock market, a little bit more risky, it has its ups and downs. So if they're pulling money out of those government bonds and putting it back in the stock market, that's when we see home rates go up. So that's why rates every day, they can change a little bit. They can, they're just very investor driven. So every day we see a little bit of change daily with them.
So Justin obviously is super smart at what he does. If you have questions for Justin that maybe falls outside of the stuff that we've talked about, you're going to find Justin's contact information down below. If you have questions for me, go ahead and find me at martin.teamre.com. Anything else you want to throw in there? Going just really quick on the interest rates thing. It's one of the biggest things that we've seen so far this year is a big response to the pandemic, to COVID-19, and so the other things seem to be getting better and they're opening back up. That's good news for the economy, right? So so when I hear the question of what are rates going to do long term, when you take that into account, that things continue to get better, the economy's getting better. It probably leads that rates will continue to go up. So if you're kind of on the fence about buying a home, now is a great time to do it because the rates are still at historically low levels. Hey, I got to tell you what, he's your guy. Find him on the contact information that shows up down below in the links. Let's figure out how to get you over to Justin and get some great help.
That's great.
Yeah, remember, life is better with the team.